Good evening, everyone. Welcome to part 7 of Fireside Chats with Dave. Tonight we continue our look at the history of golf in Western Pennsylvania. And tonight we're going to focus on the regional figures that have impacted Western Pennsylvania golf. I would just like to remind everybody beforehand that if you've missed any of the previous weeks of Fireside Chats with Dave, you can find them on our Facebook page and also on our YouTube page. And we encourage you to go back and watch any of them that you may have missed. As I mentioned tonight, we're going to discuss the regional figures in Western Pennsylvania golf. And there's 5 individuals that I want to focus on this week. And they're kind of spread over different aspects of the game. We have a golf course architect, one of the founders of Oakmont, who was an accomplished amateur golfer. We have a gentleman that his philanthropy really promoted the game in our region. We have a teaching professional that has made just a momentous impact on the game of golf globally now at this point. And I'm very excited to sit down and talk about these guys with you. So let's jump right into it. Let's talk about the 4 regional figures that have impacted Western Pennsylvania golf. And the very first person we're going to talk about is William C. Fownes Jr. Now, William C. Fownes Jr., who from now on I'm going to refer to as WC, was born in 1877 in Chicago to Henry C. Fownes and his wife Mary. Now, Henry Fownes is the founder of Oakmont Country Club, which was established in 1903. And W.C. Fownes was another impact person in the early foundations and the early history of Oakmont Country Club. W.C. was named after his father's brother, William Clark Fownes. And after graduating from MIT with a degree in chemical engineering, W.C. Fownes went into the family business. He worked in the steel and iron industries here in Western Pennsylvania. Unfortunately for W.C., at the age of 28, he suffered from a massive heart attack. The stress of the managing a steelworks was just too much for him, and he immediately retired and devoted the rest of his life to the game of golf and Oakmont Country Club. And it should be noted that W.C. Fownes was an incredibly accomplished golfer. Fownes played in the era where the amateur golfer was the pinnacle of the sport. You had the likes of Bobby Jones and Francis Ouimet and Chick Evans, all names that we've mentioned in the past on this show. And in reality, W.C. Fownes is one of, if not arguably one of the top 10 best amateur golfers in American history. And I truly do believe that. When you look at his raw numbers, he competed in 19 United States Amateur Championships, and he finished in the semifinals in the top 4 more than half of the time. In 1910, he actually won the U.S. Amateur, winning it at the Country Club up in Brookline, Massachusetts, where 3 years later, Francis Ouimet would make history by becoming the first amateur to win the United States Open. Locally, Fownes was just an absolutely dominant player. He won a record that still stands to this day, 8 Western Pennsylvania Amateur Championships. He won numerous Pennsylvania State Amateur Championships, and I believe he also has a West Penn Open to his credit as well. And he's also featured on multiple Leslie Cup teams, an event that is still being played to this day, which brings together the best golfers from Pennsylvania, the New York metropolitan area, the New England states, and now includes Quebec. And W.C. Fownes played on that team a number of times, and including 2 winning sides. In 1921, following World War I, W.C. Fownes really wanted to rekindle international golf the way it was before the world went to war in 1914. He wanted the best players in Europe to play the best players in the United States. And he got a little bit of brushback from the USGA and the R&A. And in 1921 decided that if this was going to happen, if we were going to have international golf competitions, he was going to have to facilitate it himself. So he paid the way for a team of U.S. amateur golfers to go over to Great Britain and compete in what is now the first unofficial Walker Cup in 1921 at Royal Liverpool. The event went off so well that the USGA and the R&A decided that this did indeed need to be a biennial tournament. And starting the following year in 1922, the Walker Cup was officially born. And W.C. Fownes served as the American captain for that inaugural team, which included the likes of Bobby Jones, Francis Ouimet, Chick Evans, Jess Sweester, and numerous other top-notch American amateurs. And they handedly defeated the British amateur team at the National Golf Links in Southampton, New York. Following his run as U.S. Walker Cup captain, in 1924, W.C. Fownes would begin serving as the vice president of the United States Golf Association, the USGA, the governing body of golf in America. And he stayed in that role for 2 years before taking over as president of the USGA beginning in 1926 and serving a 2-year term until 1928. And it was in this role that W.C. Fownes would preside over the very first United States Open ever to be contested in our area at Oakmont Country Club in 1927, where he himself, as USGA president, would award Tommy Armour the trophy on the fabled links of Oakmont. And for more on the 1927 U.S. Open, be sure to check out Chapter 2 of our Fireside Chats. W.C. would work for the USGA or with the USGA for the remainder of his life before he passed away in 1950 right here in Oakmont of a heart attack. And his impact in the game, the Fowneses, of course, are remembered for their legendary golf course just up the street from where I'm talking to you now. But WC is often forgotten in terms of caliber of player from that era. And I think WC, with his record locally and his play on the national level, and then, of course, his contributions with the Walker Cup and the USGA must certainly be noted heavily. The next name we're going to look at, the next individual, the best way to describe him is as a Renaissance man. And that man is Emil Dutch Leffler. Now, Emil was born in 1897 to Swiss immigrants, and he grew up right in Oakmont and became a caddy when the club opened in 1904. By the age of 12, he was the caddy master. By the age of 18, he was the golf course superintendent. And after serving in World War I, he would come back and in the late 1920s take over the job as the head professional as well as the head superintendent. And he would stay in that role until 1947 when he relinquished the head professional position to Lou Worsham and would pass away the following year in 1948 due to complications of his service in World War I, actually. Emil Leffler was a very accomplished player. He won 2 Pennsylvania Opens in 1920 and 1922. He won the West Penn Open in 1920. And he also participated in 6 U.S. Opens and 2 PGA Championships in his career. But where Leffler would be most remembered, especially in Western Pennsylvania, is as a golf course architect. If you look at many golf courses in our region, some now defunct, some still in existence, over 20 golf courses in Western Pennsylvania hold the blueprint of Emil Leffler's mind. He designed over 20 courses, including the now defunct Oakmont East, Alcoma Country Club, which is now known as 3 Lakes in Penn Hills, Hillcrest Country Club in Lower Borough, and Shanapin Country Club in Pittsburgh. And as I mentioned, his design firm, along with a gentleman named John McGlynn, either designed or redesigned countless golf courses in our region during his lifespan. And unfortunately, in 1948, Emma Leffler died at the very young age of 51 of complications that arose from him being gassed during the First World War while serving in France. He was only 51 years old. The next name I want to discuss with you is our philanthropist when it comes to golf in Western Pennsylvania. This man has been incredibly generous. And if you are very familiar with the area, you probably recognize his name as Frank Furher Jr. Frank is arguably our region's largest wholesale beer distributor. And because of his success in business, he has been able to really give back to the game of golf in Western Pennsylvania. His father founded Ridgeview Golf Club, which later became St. Jude Golf Club and is now Butler National Golf Club. And as I mentioned, because of his success, he has supported countless golf tournaments as a title sponsor, and also supported the Tri-State PGA and then the West Penn Golf Association in many of their adventures. And from 1984 to 1997, Frank hosted what was known as the Family House Invitational. It was a charity golf tournament that over the years raised over $3 million for local charities and annually brought in roughly 30 PGA Tour stars to play on golf courses right here in our backyard, including the Pittsburgh Field Club, Oakmont Country Club, Fox Chapel, and some of the other great courses in our area. And Frank, now in his 90s, is still an avid golfer and still gives back to this game, especially in our area, very, very generously. And the last person I want to highlight tonight, this is a very tough list to dial down. My initial list had over 10 names on it, and because we try to keep this as short and brief as possible, I narrowed it down to these four. And the last one absolutely had to make the cut, as he has impacted the game in just many, many ways, and that is Mr. Bob Ford. Bob is a PGA professional who served as Oakmont's head golf professional from 1979 until his retirement at the end of 2016. He began working at Oakmont in 1973 during the U.S. Open with then-pro Lou Worsham. And Lou took such a shine to Bob that he hired him to be an assistant pro at the club, and Bob spent the next 42 years at Oakmont. He is an incredibly accomplished player. He has played in over 10 PGA championships in his career, and he's played in 3 U.S. Opens. And in fact, Bob has a record to his name. He is one of only 3 professionals that are hosting a U.S. Open to make the cut in that U.S. Open. Bob made the cut in the 1983 U.S. Open at Oakmont, which was won by Larry Nelson. He finished in a tie for 26th. And when he wasn't on the course competing, he was in the pro shop selling merchandise for the Open. Bob was also the winner of the 1979 West Penn Open, and he's won over 17 Tri-State PGA events in the area and is a member of the Tri-State PGA and the West Penn Golf Association Halls of Fame. Bob also has played on 4 PGA Cup teams, and the PGA Cup is modeled after the Ryder Cup, but it feats the best teaching professionals from America versus the best teaching professionals from Europe. And Bob has represented the United States 4 times in that venture. Now, it's actually away from the golf course that Bob has made his biggest impact on the game, both locally and nationally. In 1987, he was named the PGA's Professional of the Year for his outstanding work at Oakmont as a player and as a teaching professional. In the following year, 1988, he actually won the PGA Club Professional Player of the Year award. But in 1985 and 1997, Bob was named the PGA of America's Merchandiser of the Year. And in fact, Bob was such a successful merchandiser at Oakmont and during the U.S. Opens that he really expanded the way golf tournaments sell merchandise. Now, if you go to the U.S. Open, you have a 40,000 square foot merchandise pavilion full of shirts and hats and golf balls and everything under the sun that you could possibly imagine. And the emergence of that comes from Bob's success of hosting the 1993 or 1983, 1992, and 1994 U.S. and U.S. Women's Opens. As I said, Bob just changed the game when it comes to golf merchandising, and he's been handsomely awarded for it. One of the other things I must discuss when it comes to Bob is how many young professionals he's mentored in his career. Bob started under the wings of Lou Worsham, and then for the next 37 years as head professional at Oakmont, he mentored countless young PGA professionals, many of which have gone on to be head professionals at very prestigious clubs such as Shinnecock Hills, where the U.S. Open was in 2018, Oakland Hills, and most recently his own successor at Oakmont, Devin G. Many look at Bob's mentorship and say that, you know, where would they be without Bob mentoring them early in their career. And it was because of this that Bob was awarded the Bob Jones Award in 2017 by the USGA, which is their highest honor. And I also mentioned that Carol Semple Thompson has also been awarded this award. As I mentioned earlier, Bob retired from Oakmont at the end of 2016, but he still serves as the head golf professional down at Seminole Golf Club in Florida, a position he has held since the early 2000s. And now, Bob is the official starter of the U.S. Open, the U.S. Women's Open, and I believe the U.S. Senior Open, contested across our nation and hosted by the United States Golf Association. So I hope you learned a little bit about a couple of our regional figures. There, as I mentioned, there were I had a list of 10 that I would have loved to cover, and time just didn't allow for that with these short fireside chats. But I thank you all for stopping in tonight and listening to me continue this great chat on the history of golf in our area. As I mentioned earlier, if you've missed any of the previous 6 chapters of Fireside Chats with Dave, they are on our Facebook page and our YouTube page, and we hope that you will go back and watch those if you missed them. A little bit of an update. The McKeesport Regional History and Heritage Center is proud to announce that we will, barring some unforeseen circumstance, be reopening next week. The official date at this moment is June 11th, and we are hopeful to stick to that date as long as things don't change with the current pandemic occurring across the country. And we're very excited to see you all return to the center. We've been doing a lot of great work as far as the exhibits and the appearance within the building, and we're excited for you to see what we've been working on this entire time. So if we do in fact open next Thursday, please make sure you come in and visit and stop by and see the great work that Gail, Teresa, and myself have been undertaking during quarantine. Please stay safe, practice social distancing, wear your mask, wash your hands. You know, we've done such a great job so far that we've gotten to this point where we are capable of reopening, and I hope very much that it won't be long until we're completely back to normal. So keep up the good work. Thank you again for stopping in tonight, and we will see you next week for Chapter 8 of our History of Golf in Western Pennsylvania conversation, where we will focus on the PGA Championships contested in Western Pennsylvania. Good night, everybody.